everyday lives. In Christ we pray. Amen.
As we said, we're studying this morning in Ephesians chapter 6. If you're following along in the study guide, we're on lesson 15, continuing that study, lesson 15 in the study guide. We've been focusing the last 4 or 5 weeks on the relationship between parents and children. I think we've had some good discussions, some good studies on that. And last week, we were looking at verse 4, where it says, "And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." And so we looked at that passage, mainly the first part. We did a lot with the first part, then we got into the last part as well. But we spent a good bit of time looking at what it means to provoke our children to wrath. And then last week we got into the idea of bringing our children up, bring them up, what that means. And we discussed the idea that raising godly children is not an easy thing to do. And it's a very important thing to do because the influence of the parents is something that's going to last throughout the child's life as they grow into adulthood and as they hopefully will have children of their own and create families and things like that. And so it's a very important task that God has given to parents to bring children up, and then fathers in particular, as they are the leader of that effort in bringing the children up. We were looking at what it means to bring them up in the nurture. The New King James Version says in the training, and we discussed that toward the end of our study last week. And we saw, Paul uses 2 words to indicate the direction that parents are to take in raising their children: in the training, in the nurture, and the admonition. And so we spoke about the nurture last week. Lord willing, we will speak about admonition this week, but it seems like he uses the positive and negative sides here as far as how parents are to go about raising their children, both the instruction and the disciplinary actions there that we need to take in training our children. The first word, nurture, as we said, is the same Greek word that's translated chastening in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 7. And so this is the idea that we're looking at here. We discussed how this training was to be done. It was to be done by personal commitment to the truth, commitment with devotion, and commitment with sincerity. And so we see this borne out in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 6, or Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 6. We read that passage, and we see how that God, when he was instructing the children of Israel on how to conduct, really their everyday lives, the section there on the family, the children, this is what he laid out in those passages. And then as we continue on there in Deuteronomy chapter 6, we also see that it is to be done by personal communication. And so it's a personal commitment as well as personal communication. We are to use our words. We are to instruct our children with our words. We are to instruct them with our example. Example is a very important part of raising children because they are going to be looking at what we do, not only what we say. And I believe example probably in many instances is a more powerful thing than our words, because they are definitely looking at what we say. And hypocrisy is a very dangerous and a very destructive thing in just about any relationship, or I say all relationships, but especially when it comes to the parent-child relationship, hypocrisy can be very destructive there. And then the environment that we raise our children in, the home, and the type of atmosphere that we develop there in our home is very important when it comes to raising our children. And so this is how the nurture or the training is to be done. And so it's a very important aspect of raising our children. And so we finished up there last week, and so we will pick up with the second part of that. So not only, along with the nurturing, the chastening, Paul instructs parents to bring their children up in the admonition of the Lord, the admonition of the Lord. And so this Greek word translated admonition means to counsel, to give verbal instruction with view to correct. And so this is a verbal instruction that we are giving our children. with the view of correcting them if need be. And so this is sort of a disciplinary type of thing, is putting in mind of right. And so we're putting in their mind things that are right, and we're instilling that maybe with some sort of disciplinary action if it's needed. So we must find the time not only to perform the action of discipline, but also to instruct them with our words. And so this is not something that we do, we see our children doing something wrong, we spank them and we give them no verbal cues whatsoever as far as what's going on. And that's not the way we go about it. It's an admonition, it's disciplinary action with verbal cues, verbal things so they understand what's going on. We need to act, but we also need to speak, and we need to instruct our children. And so we must have the courage and faith to follow up with corrective discipline. And this is key to raising children. We must not be afraid to correct our children with the proper discipline that they need. And by doing so, we are going to teach them respect for authority. And as we discussed several times in our previous studies, this is so important when it comes to raising our children. We'll read a few passages there in Proverbs. These passages, I'm sure, are very familiar to all of us, but I think it goes without saying that we need to look at these as we're discussing this idea of discipline and correcting our children. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 18, chasten your son while there is hope, and do not set your heart on his destruction. A lot of times we as parents, we delay the chastening part, and the hope begins to fade. And so we must chasten our children while there is hope. And so this begins very early in their lives, as they begin to develop mentally at a very young age. We need to begin chastening and therefore disciplining our children as appropriate. And we need to do so in appropriate manner. And in any of these things, I'm not condoning child abuse in any way whatsoever. And so I want to make that clear. We do not need to abuse our children physically, emotionally, any of those things. We need to. There's a line that we can cross, and we need to understand that. But there is a place for appropriate discipline, and it's very important that we do that. And we can't let our fear of going too far keep us from disciplining our children, because we're doing as much damage by the lack of discipline as we were if we were to go too far with discipline. And so we need to make sure that we have things in perspective. And like I said before, this is not an easy thing to do. When we decide to take on the role of a parent, and a father in particular, it's a very important role, and it's not easy. And so we must be willing to take the time, make the effort to do this properly. And a lot of guidance can be given by others, older people in the congregation, our parents. If we didn't have a very good home life, go to someone who did, and get advice from them. And just because a child does something, right now, this morning, doesn't mean that we have to decide on that discipline in the moment. A lot of times I think it's good to allow ourselves to cool down, to think about these things. And if you're not sure, call somebody and ask them. And I've done that. We've had situations. I'm not sure how to handle this. Am I being too hard on them? Am I being hard enough? What's appropriate? Somebody from the outside can see that many times more clearly than we can when we're right there in the middle of it. And so seek advice. I've often talked about the wisdom of God in putting us in a situation like this, where we have brothers and sisters in Christ that can help us in so many aspects. And so we need to use those relationships to the fullest. And if we are struggling, look at a family that seems to be doing it right. And if things seem to be going well there, then seek advice from those people and see what they would advise. And so I encourage anybody to do that that's struggling in those areas. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 15, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of correction will drive it from them. And so certainly children are foolish at times. I mean, when we talk to people sometimes when things are going bad in maybe an argument or whatever, we say, well, that's childish. There's a reason we say that. Because children a lot of times don't think clearly, they think selfishly, they don't see the big picture. And if we do not make an effort to get that out of them, then they will continue to think like that into adulthood. And either they're going to make people miserable around them, or ultimately they're going to come to some sort of catastrophic end and things are going to be bad. And so we need to make sure that we try to get that foolishness out of the heart of our children and teach them the proper way. Proverbs 22, verses 13 and 14, do not hold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod, he will not die. You shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. And so the temporary pain that our children will experience when we are spanking them, so to speak, is nothing compared to the pain that they will experience in hell if we fail to do so properly. And so we are not thinking only of the temporary comfort of our children right here in the moment. We're thinking about their eternal comfort in the life after this one. And so any temporary pain that our children experience here, if we can drive that foolishness from their heart with the temporary pain, then we are vastly benefiting them over neglecting to do that, and then them spending eternity in hell where they will experience agony and pain forever. And so we need to understand that. Disciplining our children is not an easy thing to do. It's just not an easy thing to do. And so, like I said, I'm not condoning any sort of abuse when it comes to disciplining our children. I think you can spank a child without abusing them. I think you can do so, and it crosses the line into abuse. It needs to be appropriate. And so we can do that, and we can do so in a manner that's not going to affect our children throughout their lives, or it's not going to be a long-term effect on them. I'm sure most of us in here got spankings as a child. I mean, David was talking about his mother a couple of weeks ago, and sounds like he got some pretty good discipline, but he looks back on his mother with love and affection. It didn't create hard feelings. I mean, there may have been some there in the moment, I'm sure, but as he looks back, he sees that that's what he needed in order to reach the point where he's mature and he sees those things that he was doing as foolishness. And so if we do so with love, our children will see that. They will understand that. It might make them angry in the moment, but ultimately they are going to see the love that we have for them. And there again, I think the key to doing that is doing so with love and not in anger. And if we are about to spank our children and we're very, very angry, I would counsel to hold off a little bit and spank your child when you're not so angry. And so that's just I think you're more likely to cross the line there. And so that's my advice there. And there's people in here that have done a lot better job than I have in many ways as a father. So, but spanking is not the only form of discipline. And I think all of us understand that. Many times growing up, we may have been disciplined, and maybe I think I've said it, and then I think I've heard other people say it. I think I would rather have a spanking as that happened. And so we can be creative in our discipline. And sometimes as the children get older, the spankings just aren't appropriate anymore because it just doesn't affect them like it used to. And so then we start taking privileges away. We could set them to doing tasks that they don't necessarily enjoy. We could do many things that would be disciplinary in nature and be appropriate to what I'd say the crime they committed or whatever rule they broke, and may result in a better outcome. And even growing up, even younger children, depending on the personality and a lot of circumstances, these other things might be more effective than spanking even at a younger age, depending on the child. And so fathers need to understand that. And we talked about what a difficult task it is to really understand your children, especially as they vary in personality. And so it's a difficult task, but it's one that we as fathers need to undertake with seriousness and understand how grave of a responsibility it is. The rod, what we do, and reproof, what we say, gives wisdom, but a child left to himself brings his mother to shame. So the rod and reproof gives wisdom, but a child left to himself brings his mother to shame. And this is a very true proverb. We see it over and over and over again, as we are out in the communities and we see children behaving in a way, not only as they're young, but as they get older, they never grow up, and they're never able to stand on their own because they weren't properly disciplined as a child. There was not that nurture and admonition going on in the household. And it just, it's appalling sometimes to see the home being run by these children that really, that have all this foolishness bound up in their heart, but yet the parents seem so afraid of crossing the child that the child just runs the house. And the house is chaos. And it's a sad thing. And we're not doing our children any favors when we do that. I know I've talked a lot. Anybody have any comments or anything they would like to say along those lines? Like I said, I know there are people here who have a lot more wisdom on this subject than I do. Yes, Bill.
As you appropriately pointed out, discipline that falls under the guise of the bringing up the child in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And you pointed out also that there's the potential of going to hell, not only for the parent who neglects their duty, but also for the child.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't stop there. It goes a whole lot deeper.
Yeah.
If you don't train your child as you ought to with discipline, what's going to happen with his children?
Yeah.
They're not going to get trained as they should. And I would say that would fall back on me as the parent.
That's very correct. And Tim made that point either last week or the week before, how this is a generational thing that we are affecting not only us and our children, we're affecting grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And so we need to understand that. Those who may listen to Dave Ramsey, I mean, he speaks about that when it comes to financial things, how that, I think he says change your family tree, I think is what he says. With these people that are always struggling financially in debt and, all that, do this for your children, teach them the proper way, change your family tree. And so put them on the proper path. But more importantly, we need to be looking at that spiritually. And if our family tree has been good throughout the years, don't change it. But if it needs to be changed, do so. And we could have, it could be lasting consequences if the world continues to exist for decades to come. And it's a very important thing. Any other comments? Yes. Mm-hmm.
I know of an instance. I'm sure there's more, but this one that I know of is personally know of. Family, mom and dad issues in the house. And the children were pretty much just left at the same. And they literally were, that they're grown now. And there's a lot of issues with them now. They can't seem to hold the job down for very long. They're in different types of trouble. And one of the relatives of the family asked me one time, been a few years ago, we were talking about it. And he said, what do you think's wrong with it? And I used that verse right there. And, you know, he had never thought about that. I don't know how he did. And he said, that's exactly what happened. And it was. And it's a sad story, and it'll probably continue to be like that.
Yeah. And just kind of going along this theme, we knew of some people that were raising their great-grandchildren. Not only had they raised their grandchildren, but now they were raising their great-grandchildren. And, that's a sad thing to do. I mean, that goes along with what we were talking about, that generational thing. Here are people that are, very, they're up in years, but yet they're still wrangling these great-grandchildren, because not only were their children not raising the grandchildren, it was the great-grandchildren. It just affected them all down the line. And that's a sad thing to see that. And so we need to understand how important it is to go about raising our children properly. And we even today we see more and more grandparents raising their grandchildren, because the children just aren't in the picture. Where this was, back 50 years ago, it had to be a catastrophe of some sort for that to happen. The parents were killed or something like that. But today, the parents may be alive and well and just living their best life, but they've left the grandchildren to their parents. And it's a sad thing when that responsibility is neglected, because they're going to give account for that. They're going to give account for that. And so we need to make sure that we're doing our part early. It doesn't start as our children begin to get married, and it starts at birth, basically, as we begin doing those things. Any other comments? As we finish up this section of our study, I wanted to note here and say something a little bit about how that this instruction is given to the father and how we need to note that. This is a responsibility given to the father. We all understand the mother's role in the family is great, and it cannot be overstated how important the mother is in the family and her role. And it's a great role. But this particular thing here, when we're talking about leadership and discipline and things along those lines, that responsibility of leadership is given to the father. And so this is a grave responsibility that we as fathers have. In our society, when we look at the engaged fathers that are engaged in the life of their children, we see that this is getting less and less frequent. From some statistics that I read, I was trying to find statistics, and I found a website entitled the National Fatherhood Initiative. And it was a website kind of devoted to encouraging fathers to be involved in the lives of their children. And so this website had a lot of information there, but what our society is trying to do is destroy the family. They're trying to break that family unit apart. They're trying to convince people that living as a husband and wife and a family unit is not important. It's not something that you should strive for. You're binding yourself in a way that you shouldn't. Your freedom's being taken away from you when you start doing these things. And so women, you don't need a man. You don't need a man in your life. And that, a single woman, I'm not saying that you have to have a man, that you have to get married. But when we start having children, then I think you do. I think in a lot of ways, men are beneficial to this relationship. And we see that all throughout what's going on today. According to the 2024 census, 1 in 4 children in this country live in a home without a biological or adoptive father. So you go to Walmart today, and every 4th child you see is living in a home without a father. So 1 in 4 are living in a home without a father. And this is only increasing. And we see the effects on our society today. Research, and this is hard data, research that has been done shows that when a child is raised in a home without a father, they are at greater risk for poverty. They are more likely to have behavioral problems. They're at a greater risk for infant mortality. I mean, they're looking at these children that have died. We're talking about infants that have died, and you look at the statistics, and the numbers don't lie. The death rates of children are higher in homes without a father. You can't argue with that. And so these behavioral problems, this mortality, children in a home without a father are more likely to go to prison. They're more likely to commit a crime. They're more likely to become pregnant as a teen. A daughter, a young girl in a home without a father is more likely to become pregnant as a teen. The numbers do not lie. They're more likely to face abuse and neglect. Without a father there, they're more likely to face abuse and neglect. And a lot of times it comes from whatever live-in or boyfriend or whatever is going on with the mom. These men are coming in and out. It's just this revolving door of these men coming into the home. And so we see it time and time again. There's abuse and neglect with these men that's just coming in and out. And as I said, the numbers do not lie. They're more likely to abuse drug and alcohol. They're more likely to suffer obesity. They're more likely to drop out of school. And so a father is an important role model for a child, both male and female children. I mean, I read a book, it's been a few years, but it was very eye-opening to how important a strong male role model is to our young ladies. Because that's what, in a lot of ways, they're going to go look for. Somebody like their daddy. And so, again, we're affecting these children generationally. And so if we are absent and we're not providing that role model, then they're going to find a role model. They're going to find something somewhere. And it's our responsibility to teach them to find the right person there. But what we get in today's society, if you're watching the modern sitcom, I mean, you think about it. How is the father portrayed in the modern society? An idiot, a goofball. And, I think it goes back to the Cosby Show. He was just a goofball. The mom had to hold things together. The dad was just, he was one always messing up, which I'm not saying fathers are perfect, but that's all we are fed through our modern sitcoms. The dad is the idiot. The dad is not the role model. And it's sad. Because while there are some goofball dads, What we need to strive to be as Christian men is the opposite of that. We need to be a strong role model. We need to be a leader. We need to be masculine. We need to be protective. We need to guide our households. We need to stand up. We need to lead. And we need to be the type of person that somebody will want to follow. And so this is important because modern society is trying to do away with masculinity. They're trying to take that away from our young men. And what do we have? We have these men, these young men with pent-up frustrations. So they're not given any outlet to express themselves. They have all this testosterone within their system, and they're told to keep that in. And we can't do that to our young men, to our boys. We've got to teach them masculine things. We've got to teach them to be a man. And there's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with teaching your boy to be a man. And we don't need to subscribe to this new idea that our boys have to be feminine, that they have to take on these feminine traits. Because they're boys. And when we start directing them in a way that their physical makeup, that God has designed them to be this way, when we start trying to take that out of them, we create a lot of problems. And you look at these young men that perform all these mass shootings and things like that. When you look at the statistics again, the vast majority of them did not have a father in the home. Statistics, the numbers don't lie. The father was, now I'm not saying every one of them, but most of them. They're frustrated. They're not. And I'm not trying to condone this in any way. I'm just saying that we have failed as a society to give these young men what they need. We have failed. And so if we want to start changing things, if we want to start doing away with these mass shootings, then we need to start in our own households. We need to change the direction that this country is going by starting with our own household. And then, as we said, that's going to affect generations to come. Teach your boys to be men. You be a man in your household. Now, being a man, again, as we've already studied and looked, in this chapter, and Dylan had taught, you were a teacher before. I had my mind went blank there for a minute. But before, being a man means that you're subjected to your wife, you're subjected to your children. It means sometimes, going without, neglecting what you want to do. That's all about being a man. It's not coming in saying, this is what I want, and you're going to do it whether you like it or not. Being a man means putting your family first. It doesn't mean I'm going to go play golf, I'm going to go golf, and I don't care what you say, that's what I'm going. That's not being a man. That's being a tyrant. That's being selfish. That's being childish. Being a man means that your family needs something, and you're not going to do what you want to do, you're going to do what they need. Gerald. Okay. The fundamental problem with the family, are you asking me a question? I'm sorry. Okay. There's a lot, but I think it boils down to is a lack of respect for God and His and the roles that He has set for us, and prioritizing what He prioritizing God. Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, the numbers don't lie, and you look at our society, and since this idea of this feminism, and I'm not saying that we again, we can take things too far on either side, but this idea that a woman can't be fulfilled outside the home, that she can't be fulfilled in just being a mother and raising her children and providing those sort of things that we've convinced our young ladies, this is not the life for you. And then we've convinced the young ladies also that your husband doesn't have the intellectual ability to lead the family, and all these roles just get messed up. And we look at the numbers, and that's where society starts going off the skids. That's where you start having the mass shootings and things of that nature. It just, when the roles begin to be blurred, and nobody really understands who's leading, who's supposed to follow, there's no respect for authority, things go off the skids. And it's a child, the best thing we can do for a child is provide them structure. They know what to expect. If I do this, this is going to happen. What a comfort it is. I've never been in that position, but I've read others, and I've dealt with some that, for a child to come in and know that when they come in the door, that there's going to be food there for them. There's that comfort, there's that stability. And I'm not saying that it's always the father's fault if that's not there, because circumstances happen, but just having that stability brings comfort to a child, but yet even the stability of knowing that, if I do this action, this is going to happen. I know what's going to happen. Because one of the most agonizing things is you don't know how somebody's going to react if you do something. I don't know what to do because I don't know what they'll say either way. But our children know, and we're giving them those clear cues that if you do this, this is going to happen. And so, I got way off of your question, Jake.
I think when we talk about, this ever so slightly been kind of touched on, I believe, when we're talking about responsibilities and masculine and feminine roles and family roles and all that, I think it's important to recognize that what the world sees, when the world does make the distinction, because as we mentioned, those lines have started to get blurred, but what the world sees as masculine, what the world sees as feminine, does not always match up with what God sees as masculine, what God sees as feminine. There's a lot of things, well, if you're a man, you've got to behave like this, and the Bible gives no such commandment, may even say the opposite, right? You were talking, some people consider it masculine to go out and golf or whatever, to leave, abandon the family basically to go enjoy themselves with the boys. And that's the opposite of what the Bible says. But there's many things that are that way. And I think that's something important to kind of always keep in mind whenever we talk about masculine and feminine, to not put what maybe the current culture sees as masculine and feminine at the same level as what God sees as masculine.
Masculine is a provider, providing what our families need, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whatever it is, and just being a leader, and that, like you said, the phrase toxic masculinity. We hear that a lot if you're watching or if you're out there reading things. Toxic masculinity, and I think there is such a thing as toxic masculinity, but when everybody they want to take all in an effort to get the toxic masculinity out, they want to take it all out. And so it's just, and you look at nature, Brandy's been fascinated with some eagles out in California, and how the parents are caring, they've got a live 24/7 camera set up on this eagle nest, and how the mother and the parents are taking care of the eggs, and now the eggs have hatched, but during the snow, how the mother wouldn't leave the nest, but yet the father was still bringing her everything she needed. in order to take care of those eggs, and now I don't know what you call chicks. I mean, they're called chicks. I don't know, but anyway, here you have the father. The mother was there taking care of it, but the father was never far away. He was out on this limb right over there, watching, waiting, bringing her food, bringing her the stuff that she needed in order to take care of those eggs, and now the chicks. I mean, that's masculinity there. Sacrificing what you want to do in order to provide for your family. And so, that's a good point, Jake, that the world's definition of masculinity tends to get skewed. Any other comments?
There seems to be a neglect in looking at 1 Corinthians 11, where we find out that God is head of Christ, Christ is head of man, man is head of woman. And, speaking of masculinity and the feminine thing, well, if we're trying to put the woman ahead of man, why don't we just go ahead and put Christ ahead of God?
Mm-hmm.
Can you not say the same thing? Well, the people who advocate let's put woman ahead of man, they would never dream of putting Christ ahead of God, for what that's worth to you, sir.
We might as well just put man ahead of God if we're going to start messing with the order. I mean, it's the same thing. But, you look at what, even though Christ is ahead of man, what Christ did for man. What was he willing to do? And just because the man's ahead of woman, we've got to look to what Christ did for the church as our example, as our pattern. All right, we just have about a minute, or it may be a bell may be about to ring. Any other quick comments before we close up there? I really have enjoyed this part of the lesson. It's been a great refresher for me. I know we spent several weeks just looking at these first four verses, but I think it was important for us to do so, to reiterate or to refresh ourselves in these roles, because they are very important roles. And so, Lord willing, next week we will pick up there in verse 5. We will start speaking about our responsibilities to others at work, the employee-employer relationship. Here in these passages, we're talking, it says bondservants and masters, but I think there's no problem translating that over or putting that into the modern relationship of employee and employer. And I think it's very good for us to start looking at that and to see what those relationships are supposed to be like. And so I appreciate everyone's attention this morning. Those who commented, thank you so much for those comments. And Lord willing, we will pick up there next week.